One. Good morning. This is Greg Valoria, aka Social Greg on Twitter for the Nerdstalker Media Network. Today we're continuing our monthly broadcast segment called Startup Blog Insights with Examiner writer and entrepreneur Taffy Williams, who's co-founder and CEO of Colonial TDC. And you know that Colonial TDC offers a professional team of scientific and business experts to build and grow medical and technology companies. So he's really familiar with the entrepreneurial area, being an entrepreneur himself. He also writes for the small business section of the Examiner.com and with his own personal advice based on his own personal wisdom. So it's really kind of cool to talk to Taffy every month here. So good morning, Taffy, and welcome to Startup Blog Insights for June 2013.
How are you doing?
Good, good. It's a little bit wet here in San Francisco, but I think the weather's okay out in your area in North Carolina, right?
Maybe this afternoon we're going to get some rain. We've had much more rain this year than we have the last several.
Oh wow! Oh wow! Yeah, it looks very pretty out there. And one advice I'm going to add at the end is that you catch some of Taffy's pictures because he has some really good nature shots in there of his backyard there. So it's very beautiful. So every month, we had Nerdstalker choose two articles, as you know, that Taffy wrote, and to gain some kind of a little deeper insight into each of his articles. And this month we're focusing on cash and ways entrepreneurs can improve cash reserves and, in a way, cash flow through revenues. And so let's get started. I like the first article, which appeared on Examiner.com, and is very useful to startups, Cash. So the title of the great article that Taffy wrote really was 6 Ways to Stretch Cash Reserves. So, in the article, he kind of state that, cash is king in startups, and we all kind of know that. But, entrepreneurs do not have any in the beginning, and they're struggling to kind of keep it up after funding or even after starting out. So let's go down the list, Taffy. Use equity. So let's talk about that.
In the very beginning, all startups, I love this thing, lean startups. They all start off with no money. They all start off having to stretch money. So it's kind of, to me, it's kind of odd. I've never been in a company even before the book where you had before the book came out, lean startups, where companies had money at the very beginning. They just don't have it, and they're trying to figure out how to stretch any cash that they have, or figure out how to be able to move along without having any cash. And while entrepreneurs miss out on future value of equity that they give away, the fact that you have equity to give away in a startup that has potential means that you have something that might be tradable as opposed to cash.
I see.
And there are times where giving equity allows you to build and grow where, cash would have been great if you'd had it, but you have to use equity. If you have cash, sometimes you need to keep some on your balance sheet so that you're not negotiating in deals with no money.
Right.
Or you're not trying to raise cash with no money. If you want cram downs and you really want to get hurt, try to do a deal when there's no money in the bank. So using equity is a means of being able to stretch what little cash you have or to work in lieu of cash. And you have to be careful. You just don't give it away like candy. And you negotiate what you're giving away and realize there's the person who's getting it has an upside benefit to the equity. But on the flip side, think of it this way. If you were to invest your time as a contractor, as somebody doing some kind of service work, and you didn't get paid cash where you could have been paid cash from someone, don't you deserve some upside for that investment? It's like any other kind of an investment. So if your investment is your time.
Well, it goes on both sides, right? Because you also could use equity to hire people as well, which is kind of they're investing in you. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about that and how to kind of balance that, because I think there's two sides you're getting squeezed, right?
Yeah, you're going to get squeezed in both ways, but to hire someone, if you're trying to hire an individual that would cost you $200,000 a year, it might be that you need to give them a couple of percent of the company as equity. If you're hiring someone that's a $50,000 person, maybe you can get away with half a percent or a tenth of a percent. There is some scale, and there's going to be some flexibility in how you negotiate it and how it's given. It can be given as options. It can be given as straight equity. But even in trying to hire a contractor, let's suppose that you want to have somebody do some programming for you, or that you're doing clinical trials and you need somebody to help prepare the documents for the FDA. Paying them in options or paying them in cash, if they believe the technology has a value, is a means of being able to get work done that creates value for you.
Right.
If you recall, when Facebook went public, they made a big deal over the guy that was doing the artwork, painting the walls in Facebook. He made $200 million off his stock.
Right.
But
Right.
at the time, he didn't know he'd ever get a penny out of it. He
Yeah,
had taken
exactly.
equity for doing free work, which may or may have never generated any value at all.
Right. Right.
So he had risk capital. That was his time. He put his artwork up. And in the end, yes, he made more, and yes, the company might have lost some, but they got something that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Right.
They didn't have to pay
Right.
for it in cash.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. So, I think it'd be great to if we did another probably talk on how to actually manage that correctly. But let's go to the next one called spread payments. Now, this is a big one. It's kind of dealing with your cash flow, but it's tough for businesses starting up, isn't it, to kind of establish credit lines and other things like that in companies, right?
Well, it's pretty tough. This comes about in part was in the process of working with a company, and we're trying to figure out how to stretch what we've got to the end of a set of experiments where we think there's going to be significant value creation.
Hmm.
You don't want to be at the end of that set of experiments and then find out you don't have any runway left and your cash is all gone.
Right.
We're looking at some bills that are coming due. One or two of them were $80,000 to $100,000. And as I said, call them up and ask them if you could pay them in installments monthly. And I say, can you give them $10,000 a month? That spreads it out for 8 months, right? Well, that spreads it out beyond the point where we figured that we'd be able to raise money again. So that leaves cash in the bank at the point where we complete the stuff and gives us some time to do something with some cash in the bank. Worst case scenario is if the company doesn't make it, the guys that you negotiated with and spread the cash out lose that tail end of the money because they're not getting paid. But in the meantime, you at least put a buffer in place. So spreading your payments out can help. Another way to do that is to lease equipment as opposed to buy it. Sometimes if you buy stuff, or if you buy it on time. So leasing may cost you more in the long run, but spreading it out allows you to be able to spread those payments out over a period of time and be able to hold on to more of your cash. So looking at ways to spread payments can help you keep more in the bank, and then and maybe you'll be in a negotiating position at some point in the future where you got some money.
Right. No, that makes sense. So let's go to the third one, which is negotiate reduction. Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, that's not always so easy, but if you think you're not going to make it, and you got concerns, and you got big bills due, calling somebody and says, look, you got two choices. I'm either going to go under next month if I end up having to pay this, or we can negotiate some smaller amount of money and I pay you all right now.
Right.
Or in some other cases, you can call up and say, well, you provided these services, but the services weren't what we thought they were going to be. If they weren't, then you can try to negotiate and bring that price down.
Right.
If you can negotiate reductions before you start, that's easier than when you're done. But trying to be able to say, look, I can't pay that going forward. I'll be able to do it. And sometimes you can say, well, I'll pay you this much. I can't pay you that, and I'll pay you spread it over time. And who knows, if you're able to spread it over some period of time and you say, look, for your risk, I'm willing to pay you something extra on the end. There are things like that you can try to do. So you can look to try to negotiate a reduction, and maybe you can even try to find a way to increase, what they get on the back end if they work with you.
So here's the next one. It was really interesting when I looked at this, is adjust the timeline. And we don't think sometimes we don't think of time as money, don't we?
No, I mean, when you're trying to, and this is actually this actually is happening in some entities that I've been working with. We're in the process, and the ideal means of development is to run each of the programs in parallel, and that means you got to pay each of the programs in parallel. Well, if you do a serial portion of it, meaning you do step one, and then when step one is done, you do step two, you cost you in time, and that's going to cost you in time from time of sales. But it also means that you now can take something that you're doing and wait till you get a value accretion step and then pick up the process afterwards. So let's suppose that you're doing some development work and you really need the manufacturing to run in parallel so that at the end of the development work, you're in the process of being able to launch. But say the stage of development you're in is one that at the end of the step one creates a lot of value and you can raise money, but you know that if you try to raise money with nothing in the bank, you're going to get hit pretty hard on the valuation. So instead of running the manufacturing in parallel where you'd be paying them, maybe you could put the manufacturing on a tail end and actually elongate the timeline, which I usually don't like to do. But if it allows you to spread your money and be able to create the value and do something, that's an alternative that you can look at. There's no ideal that works here. Now, you're giving up and you're losing something, any of these, if you don't have the money in the bank.
Right.
But what you're trying to gain is flexibility to not be negotiating and doing things under duress, and to not feel like you're going to go under and not make payroll the day after tomorrow if you don't close on a deal today, so that you're able to get better terms.
Well, yeah, and especially on the timeline, especially in development, it's also, there's a risk factor that you have to factor in, right? Yeah, right. I mean, it's a lot of it is if you don't finish this CNF on it, you may not get to production. So it is a complicated decision, as you say, right?
Well, the next one's even riskier.
Well, let's talk about that. Hold off. What do you mean?
Okay, I owe you money, right? I say I owe you money. I'm not giving it to you today. Yeah, I might have it in the bank, but it's not ideal. And so you try to hold off as long as you can in paying the vendors. You start getting some nasty letters, and at some point they may try to take you to court and recover it. But to the extent that you can try to get them to hold off and not pay and go beyond your 30 days or your 60 days, you may have to pay a penalty, or maybe you have to negotiate something or whatever. But sometimes you can get away with deferring and not paying. And you're not doing it to be ugly. You're doing it so that at some point you can pay them, and you can pay them, and you can survive, and they can survive. Right. But it is risky because if you don't pay, they always have the ability to go after and get it from you in a very ugly fashion.
Right, a very, very ugly fashion. So, and let's go to the last one, which is, it sounds like a no-brainer but difficult. It's called raise capital.
Yeah, the best time to raise money is when you don't need it.
Oh, is that so?
It is. You got money in the bank and people come along and want to give you money. That's the best time to take it, because when you do need it and you're desperate, that's when it's going to cost you the most.
That's very true.
And if you have the ability to say no to a really bad deal, that is a really great it's a really great negotiating position.
Yeah, desperation doesn't feel good, does it?
No. Been there, done that. It's like, gotta have this money, we're closing the doors within the next week. Okay, that's pretty tough. That means the deal that comes in is likely to be one you have to accept it because you don't have a lot of choice. You can try to get the best terms. It's got to be a cram down.
Well, people don't realize when they read your articles, I think a lot of these are interrelated. These aren't just standalone things. This then goes into the leadership stuff you talk about in terms of making the right decisions, asking the right advisors, and all that type of stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, it all ties together, and people take these. And so, I mean, I had a comment from someone, on Twitter saying that, giving away equity, they thought it was a bad idea. Well, okay, that's great if you can afford not to give away equity and you got ample cash, but sometimes that doesn't work.
Yeah, no, and
I love it. I've had other ones where people would make comments on how great they did in managing their companies and how they didn't need to do this. Hello?
Hello, you're back again?
I think
Wow.
so. I'm trying to figure. There you go.
Yeah, we
You
dropped out
know,
again.
so there's an
There
issue
you are.
where one
Sorry about
person
that.
has on a number of occasions made comments about hey, he never had to do any of this kind of stuff. And I went through and looked at the companies he was involved in, and they were all before 1995. Well, before 1995, you could put a business plan together and people would throw money at you. After 2000, it became much more difficult, and after 2007, it became damn near impossible. The time frame that you're actually working carries an impact on the conditions in which you're working, and the impact that that has on how you implement each of these terms. The
Right.
fact that you were really great 20 years ago doesn't mean you're really great today.
Well, and like you said, the landscape changes, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm more in the IT field, and Taffy is actually more in the the medical clinical area. And though they operate a little bit differently because of certain external pressure changes and conditions, they're about the same in a lot of ways in terms of the basics of entrepreneurship, right?
A
And
lot of the basics, yeah, a lot of the basics are the same. I'm working with a couple of IT companies right now, and we're going through some of the same things. How do we structure them? How do we get the technology into the companies? How do we find the money? How do we, all of the same kind of issues, and they're roughly the same. At some point, when you start getting into sales and marketing, they deviate a little bit. You still got some of the same issues in sales and marketing, and people, because they're very similar. No matter what
yeah,
you're selling, you could be
right.
selling widgets, you could be selling bathing suits, or you could be selling toenail clippers. I mean, if
Right,
people don't
right.
want it, they don't want it.
Yeah, exactly. So let's thanks a lot. That was really kind of cool. I liked that first segment we had. So again, you're listening to Taffy Williams, writer of Startup Blog and writer for Examiner.com. So speaking of Examiner.com again, let's move to another article that Taffy wrote for Examiner.com, which is 4 actions that result in improved revenue models. Because we're talking about cash this month. So let's talk about that, because I think people go through some of these steps, but not all these steps. So let's talk about market analysis. What do you need to do there?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. When I used to do this myself, we would go through, scan all the literature, look at all the things that are out there, and decide, well, here's our market based off of the total number of people that would use this product. That's a theoretical market. That's not
Right.
actual market of who would capture, why they would buy it, or anything else. When you really get down into the weeds, and try to figure out who's going to be using your product, why they would be using your product, and adoption, that becomes now a much more detailed exercise. Sometimes it requires doing, consumer analysis by interviews. Sometimes there are implications about how the market is going to be managed, because one group or another group might be responsible for your target audience that would be the gatekeepers to the people that are going to use it. If you find that someone in the marketplace is selling a competing product and they're going to lose market share by your entry of the market, you're going to find them stepping up and ramping up their target, target to try and keep you from doing it. Your analysis really needs to look at much more than the number of people that are theoretically out there that would use your product.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and I think in a lot of places where I was a product manager, we not only do top-down analysis, we do bottom-up, and kind of look at from different angles. I think the idea is just to look at what you're saying is just look at it at different angles so that you can actually really assess the risk, right, and what's
Well,
going on, right?
it's not just assessing the risk. I could give you this from a medical perspective.
Mm,
Let's at one company we were launching a product, and we had a second generation product that we were developing. And in launching the first product, what we learned was that, in medical school, the students were being taught if you have to use this kind of product, then you're not very good at doing whatever you do as being a doctor.
mm,
Okay, well,
mm,
that's counterintuitive. Now you're trying to convince the students that are now practicing physicians that you really should use this product. Then
right.
you find out that that product, in use of that product, causes another class of physicians to lose their patient population, because you're targeting and selling to a physician population, let's say cardiology, whereas radiology would be the ones normally doing it. The radiologists aren't giving up their patients to the cardiologists. They're going to fight very hard not to do that.
Right.
So the shift in who controls the patient and how the product is going to be used is an important factor in adoption. Now, if you want to, what we're trying to do was enhance the market by getting another indication. So what you don't realize is that, in going out and talking to raise capital, because this was a no-brainer, we thought we were going to get into a $1 billion plus market with the product. What we didn't realize is that, every fund manager out there must have had a physician in that category that was their next door neighbor, because they all went next door and asked them what they thought of the product, and they said, well, I don't know that I would use it. And this is, even though they're not scientifically attuned to it, they're not, this becomes a part of this adoption. In other words, the physicians did not believe they would use the product. I'm guilty of this too, by the way. I went to my next door neighbor who's a urologist and asked him to evaluate a product because I didn't like it. I don't even know if he looked at it. I just didn't bother to do any more work on it because of it.
Right.
But that is all part of your adoption. That is all part of your market, the perceived things, how you're going to capture it. All of that has to be looked at, and it can have a significant impact on what you really are going to sell.
Yeah, in terms of revenue, definitely. So, and then next is important, I believe, is customer survey. Listening to your customers, right? Listening to the potential customers. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've hired survey, and some companies, we've hired survey groups to go out, collect groups, 30, 40, 50, ask targeted questions, try to collect information to be able to know what they thought of the product, where they thought the shortcomings were, determine how to best, promote it. Now, as an example I put in here, which is a non-medical one, this is really funny. A number of years ago, I don't know how many, maybe 10. I was reading about a story of a group that was a foreign company that had managed to take some buffalo and fry them up in these kind of chip-like flavored materials, right? And they were going to call it buffalo chips. Now,
oh my God.
Now, they didn't realize at the time what buffalo chips meant here in this country. So just picking a name, buffalo chips, and targeting and selling is probably not the best. And I think that after some type of a survey, they realized that was not very bright, and they changed the name of the product. Now, I don't know if the stuff's even on the market. But again, that's an example of evaluating your product from top to bottom.
That's incredible. No, I deal with a lot of Asian companies, and they run into the same problem. We call it in the IT area called localization. You want to localize a product to whatever is. Well,
certain symbols. And I can't remember which countries they are, but like the victory symbol in the U.S. is nasty in some countries.
Exactly.
There are, the connotations of things that you do are perceived totally different in other countries. You don't hand your business card to someone. You don't take someone's business card in Asia, any of the Asian countries, Japan, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and put it in your wallet and sit on it. Right. Now, that's conceived very rude. Their business cards are perceived as something that should be revered and respected. You're supposed to sit and look at those. The customs within the region you're in will be different. So even in terms of evaluating your products and looking at the customs and how things are used, that's all critical.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the next one, business partner. Wow, I thought this was kind of different because I didn't think about that when it comes to revenue. Yeah,
if you want to have a business partner, you really have to demonstrate to them how first they're going to make money. If they're not going to make money, why would they work with you? Right. So that's number one. There's a lot of internet sites that want to have companies involved, and if you can't show the internet sites how they're going to make money with it, that's fine. They're giving free services, but how do you make money on that? And so, there's as an example, let's suppose you have a social networking site, and you're going to have your next door neighbor know that you're going to a ball game and he can sit next to you and buy tickets. How do you get paid? How does the company get paid? How are you going to promote that? Let's suppose that you want to share information about products you're buying or selling. And let's say that, they can be clothes, it could be food, it could be whatever, and you're going to have something where you have some kind of a sharing arrangement. What are you going to put on there? You're going to put you're going to hook everybody into Amazon and try to get paid based off of the whatever small amount you make out of Amazon. I mean, what is the revenue model for these, and how much do you really intend to get, and what do they expect to get from it, and is that really going to work for both parties?
Right.
So by optimizing all of the parameters, the next things which cover, your advertisements, your contracts, your user fees, everything else. If you optimize those appropriately, you get your best chances for making money. Okay, and that's absolutely critical. And as I stated in one of my other blogs, build it and they will come is not a business plan.
And that happens a lot. I mean, I think, the problem is people get influenced by the lucky ones, because they're always written about. And they don't realize there's this kind of like iceberg of unlucky ones who've done that, right?
I mean, it's more common than you would think. I sat down with somebody that I was mentoring over the last couple of months, and he wanted to build a website that would cater to a particular population of individuals.
Okay.
And so I'm looking at it, and I says, okay, I get you can get people to sign up, and they want to talk to each other. Great. Okay, I got it. I see those all the time. And it was a people like me site, And I says, okay, are you going to charge fees? Oh, no. This is going to be available to them. I say, okay, who's paying you? And he says, what do you mean? I says, okay, back up. Where's the revenue coming from?
Yeah.
He had an idea for a website,
right?
But it's not a business until he knows how he's going to make money. And he says, okay, that's not even a charity yet. So we had to back up and work through half a dozen different scenarios to try and identify populations that would pay to either be advertisers, business partners, or something, so that there would be money coming in and he would know who to target sales to.
Right.
If you could have 100,000 people on a website exchanging information, that's great.
Yeah, well,
none of them are paying, and there are no user fees, and there wouldn't be for a lot of these because I don't like to pay user fees. How are you going to make money?
No.
Do it.
Yeah, and people don't realize the advertising revenue is really difficult.
That's right. And so advertising doesn't bring in a lot of revenue. You can have a revenue sharing model where if you sold somebody else's product through the advertisement, but how much of that are they willing to do? I mean, if I had a product and I advertised, I might be able to pay you like 0.006 cents a click.
Yeah, I think on Nerdstalker we make enough on our advertising revenue to pay for our business cards every year. So.
I don't even get that. Look, I got advertisements. They're advertisements, and I get paid from writing for the Examiner, and I get paid from my blog site. Okay, if you took the money from the advertisements, I'm not even sure I could afford to buy a six-pack.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
it really doesn't always. It depends on who it is, but they're on there because I was curious more to see what effect they would have. But the reality is that making money through advertisements is not a good way to make money.
Yeah, no, I think, not singularly at least. So, a lot of these things you talked about today in this podcast is really about also part of the whole business plan, right? And the business model, right?
Yeah, if you don't think carefully up front about what your business is and where your money's coming from and how much money you're going to make, you can't make good cash flow projections.
Right.
Can't make good cash flow projections. How are you going to stretch your dollar when you finally get into the cash flow situations? You don't know what you're going to make. You don't know how much you're spending. Really, it comes down to projecting, including projecting when you think the optimal time is to raise money.
Right.
And putting it in your statements. Not for everybody else to see, for you to know when to go raise money. Right.
So anyway, I think we'll close at least the the part of the show we talk about your articles, but usually what I do every month, Taffy, I ask you about some advice you would ask, and let's maybe focus on on cash this month since we're talking about cash. What advice would you give an entrepreneur about cash, just in general, as we talked about earlier?
Hold it as long as you can.
The sage wisdom and advice from Taffy Williams for June startup blog insights. But hold it as long as you can. That's simple. I like it. I think that'll sell. You're funny, man. You're funny. So anyway, let's close off the interview. I like this. And thanks for the interview again for this month. I think next month you might be coming to San Francisco. Well, we might be doing live from San Francisco. I'm not sure, but we're talking about that right now.
Yep.
So how can listeners get a hold of you and get a hold of your company?
At the bottom of this page, I think it shows my Twitter address. It also shows the link to my website for the company. If you look at the Twitter address, or you look at any of my blog articles in the Examiner or other places, you'll find at the bottom email address or other contact information. And you know, if you can't find me, don't worry about writing a business plan. You're not that good.
And that's the sage advice from Taffy Williams for this month. But anyway, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it every month, and it's really fun talking to you about startups and entrepreneurship. It's really nice to have you on. So, and you know, and Taffy really is good at Twitter. He pays attention, and that's how I really met Taffy. I ended up retweeting a lot of his tweets, and we kind of just hooked up that way. I think that's the way I remember it, Taffy. I don't think I knew you before that, really.
You did.
So anyway, everyone, that was Taffy Williams of Colonial TDC. You can catch him in the small business section of Examiner.com through the Charlotte Small Business Examiner, where he writes a lot of articles about entrepreneurship, and of course his blog, startup blog. So thanks for joining us, everyone. This is Greg Gloria, a.k.a. Social Greg, on Twitter for the Nerd Stalker Media Network, where we believe in tech, startups, design, and you. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and be careful out there.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, Taffy.
Yeah, bye.